And it is showtime. Welcome everyone to Technical Excellence. My name is Daniel and I will be the host of this session. Our vision is to raise the bar of technical excellence across the world. Here are our organizers. First and foremost, Valentina Jemuovic, who is a founder and organizer of these sessions and events. Next to her, we have Alina Liburkina, who is another co-organizer. Oliver Zihler, another co-organizer and also a speaker of today, and Daniel Moka, me. Let's go for the next one. Yeah, here are our speakers from the past. We had really great and informative sessions. All of them are recorded on YouTube, so check them out. And we have also the speakers of today and, of course, the speakers for the future. We have really great and exciting session planned, so stay tuned. Yeah. And today we have a special event since we won't have a specific topic to talk about, namely we want to do an open discussions. And so I would like to ask the audience that please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We will be answering your questions live about topics such as continuous delivery, clean architecture, test-driven development, vertical slice architecture, hexagonal architecture, domain-driven design, and basically everything which relates to tech excellence. So the plan is to drive the session based on your questions. So feel free and do not hesitate to ask your questions. Yeah, and of course we can be found in a lot of places. We have the main website techexcellence.io, and you can follow us on the social media platforms such as Meetup, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, GitHub, and we have a Discord community. Feel free to join. And of course, huge thanks to our sponsor Optivem and to our partner QE Unit. Tech Excellence, learn how to deliver quality software faster. So today, as you see, we have 5 engineers. Let me introduce them. So first of all, we have Pierre Criulanscy, who is fond of TD.
Yeah, it is right.
Exactly, and he's fond of TDD, Hexagonal Architecture, and software craftsmanship in general. And he's also the owner of Craft Academy, where he spreads the words about writing quality software. Next to him, we have Peter Schuler, who is a senior Java developer at Rabobank. And Peter has been passionate about coding since he was 12 years old. He's a pragmatic and idealist engineer who writes clean code with the fondness of solid principles, test-driven development, and clean architecture. And next to him, we have Guillaume Faas, who is a senior .NET developer and advocate, and he has been involved in various business sectors in the last 15 years. And he's also passionate about building quality software with the best software engineering practices. And last but not least, we have Oliver Zihler, or co-organizer, and he's a passionate DDD and extreme programmer. All right, so, well, we are Tech Excellence, right? And our goal is to raise the bar of technical excellence. So my question is, where are we in this journey? So where are we in this reaching technical excellence globally? For example, Pierre, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Where are we in this journey to reach technical excellence? What is your take on this? Please, if you don't mind.
I think there are some good things and some bad things or terrible things, actually. The good things are that more and more people show interest in software craftsmanship, in technical excellence, something like that. That's a good thing. But on the other hand, there is a lot of semantic diffusion. I mean, all the words we use, like TDD, DDD, clean code, something like that, are very bad interpreted, actually, by a lot of people. And it's a big problem because it does harm the software craftsmanship movement, I think, because things are not applied correctly, and thus they slow down the developer who wants to try them. So there is a confusion about all those aspects of software craftsmanship. But good thing is that we talk about those topics, while maybe 5 or 10 years ago we wouldn't talk about that. So that's a good thing. But we really need to train, to explain things, and I think the most important thing is to show how to be pragmatic by applying those practice and not be too dogmatic, because it will hurt eventually the project if you are not an expert. And not everyone in the team can be an expert, and that's not the goal of software craftsmanship, to consider everyone as an expert. So we really need to show how to make things, but to how can I say, to bring the best practice when you feel the need for them, when the code hurts you, because that's the way you can feel the need for this practice. If you try to apply everything at once, I teach a lot this practice for for junior developers, and the big mistake they make is that they try to integrate everything at once, and that slows them down a lot, and they do not produce anything in weeks or months because of that. And that's a very bad press for this practice.
Okay. So you say there are also so there are a lot of misconceptions in the industry. And how could we solve this? What do you think? I mean, I think we know surely we need more mentorings, more advocates. But what do you think? What could be the best way to improve this?
For me, what is working the most for me is really to let the developers make mistakes, and after that show them, okay, you made this mistake, now you want to do that, okay, let's try to do it in other way. In this way is I don't know, dependency inversion, dependency injection. Maybe here, you are trying to test something, you lose a lot of time by just opening your browser, or just opening popping up your server and launching your Postman or Insomnia, making requests, something like that. While you just want to test something very little. So why don't you just use an automated test first to test that? Just bring the practices just when you need it, when you feel the need for them. I think that's the way to teach that in order to be efficient.
I can add to that as well. I think that the thing you always hear is, I'm done with this feature. Now all I need to do is add some unit tests. And I think that is still something that you hear so often, and it's painful to hear, because how can you code without testing what you're doing? And I think that is something that people learn and people see, and I feel that it's getting much better than it was 10 years ago. It might also depend on where you work. So I find answering your question, Daniel, very hard, because I don't know everywhere in the world what the state is of our craftsmanship. I know that the employees I worked, and I'm still working, is that it's getting better every day. And sometimes I'm now very lucky to work in a place where craftsmanship is extremely high, and we have all those things in place. And still you get the question, oh, sonar broke because I didn't do a unit test. I think it's a lesson people have to learn and learn again. So we have to just keep repeating that the importance of tech excellence and sharing our success stories.
I think what Pierre said about making mistakes. The issue I see a little bit is if there are not that many people that actually can do the things, all these things, that know the things and have tried it out, that can actually teach the other people. The other developers. How should they know? You see a pattern like, I don't know, clean architecture, and then you apply it because it solves some of your problems, but you're not an expert in it. You just try it, and only after years of development, maybe you notice, oh, okay, now now we are in a mess. I mean, but then you know it. But then you are already much further than most actually are. So I mean, I'm usually happy if there's a layered approach somewhere, and it's not just procedural code. So there, in my opinion, are not so many people out there that can actually teach it in a reliable way. I don't know how your perspective is.
I can maybe add my 2 cents on that.
Sure.
So I agree, Oliver, and I think the problem, if we can go back to, sorry again, but to the Agile Manifesto, I think if we are, let's say, a bit less scared of failing, and if we are more open to experiment and to grow this way, try something, experiment, get the feedback, get the knowledge, try again. And the problem I see is this is not in the core mindset of most people. To also join with to answer Daniel's question, my view on the current state of the market is relatively pessimistic, because what I've seen is we struggle to go to the next step. Everything we discussed today, and every big topic we have today on the main page, they are new. They've been here for like 20 years old, for 20 years, for 30 years, and we are still talking about them. Take TDD, it's in the 90s. For example, the latest book from Dave Foley, Modern Software Engineering, is mostly talking continuous integration. His first book was 20 years ago. And I see that we're struggling to acknowledge all that, to focus on what could be the next step. So I'm kind of mixed about that. On the more positive side, I see that now we also have people getting more interested into getting better. So that's good. And we also have now better access to information with YouTube, with meetups like this, with other, like with what Pierre is doing with his Craft Academy. We have plenty of ways to learn things. That's already, it puts us in the right way. And now we have to kind of share, we have to make people eager to learn, to give them the interest and the will to get better. And I think one thing that is pulling us down a little bit, it's this mindset that we have all heard before, which is we've always been doing that this way and it has been working fine so far, being reluctant to change. And I think we need to drive that. We need to kind of fade away from this point of view and try to move toward more like, can we experiment? You're never gonna, you will always have something new to learn. So experiment, try, get better, and just iterate and increment.
It's actually that's a very agile approach, right? But what I see is, I sometimes see these two categories of people: those that are actually agile and think like that, and those that aren't, that really want to plan stuff and go by the plan and are really not good at trying out new things. It needs to be planned and then executed. And I sometimes struggle to get those people to see why it could make sense to actually act in a more agile way, so in a more feedback driven, in a more can they? Is it possible to like convert people into agile people? Or the other way around? I would never say I want to have the plan and then execute it, and it's just not in me.
I think you can have. I'll try to give a short, because I don't want to take all the speech time. But I think you can have an impact, but a limited one, because what you need to give people for that to happen is psychological safety, and that comes from the environment they work in, their company, the team they work with. Most of the time, what I've seen, it's not the truth, it's what I observed. People are afraid to be wrong because they don't want to look like idiots. But it's fine to be wrong. And this is something that is difficult to acknowledge and is difficult to admit. But you need to be in a place where it's okay to say, I don't know, or I did a mistake. And it's fine. It's not a problem. But that is not necessarily on you. There is other things that play part in that.
I think it's also important to make that safe space is to learn by seeing other people doing it. Learn by change things by making an example, and it leads perhaps to the first question I saw from the audience from George. His question was, if I recall correctly, how to start with refactoring to clean code, and I think that is really that is just I think it's already there in the sentence. Just start with something small. My favorite thing is to start with most of the time is those if statements, who goes for multiple lines with ands and nested ors, and you have no idea what's actually happening there. Exactly. And then one of my favorite things is look in it and at least put a business name on it. And it might be something, if the customer has an amount in his cashback that is more than 50, then he will get even more discounts. It might be a function name worthy of an old Spring framework class, but at least you are turning then a bunch of gibberish into something that is useful. So, and it doesn't impact anything if you just extract a method there. It starts immediately making code much cleaner. And of course, without knowing the exact use case, it's a bit hard to give very specific tips, but start small and then make things bigger.
Specifically, if you don't have any tests, usually we say we can't refactor if we don't have tests. But you can start with little step by relying on your refactoring tools in your IDE. It's relatively safe, like extract class, extract function. It can be a good start to try to make sense of a mess.
Exactly, to organize your thoughts and your code in one go. And you can always start with deleting comments. That's also a very safe place to start. But George, as you say, yeah. So just start, and if you start small, nobody will object. And then if you say, but people, why don't we split these controllers into services? Then you perhaps just have to do it one time and then discuss it with your team. Get back there and say, hey, do we want this pattern to be implemented everywhere? And then next time we touch another controller, we make it cleaner. And that would be my tips. Just start small with small things, and then see if you can gather memento and convince your teammates to also support clean code.
Yeah. And also next to that, what I could say is that how to write clean code. Somehow get familiar with the base principles of clean code. For example, the naming principles, how to name software elements, how to name your booleans. And there are millions of articles about this, so you can check it out. Also the solid principles and the code smells. So there are a bunch of code smells. Doesn't mean that you need to fix all of them, but check it out whether it really makes sense in your context. And if you have this, knowledge in the background, then you can always refer to it. I would say these are the simplest things to get started: the solid principles and other principles, the basic ones, naming principles, and the code smells. I would say to get started, that's a great way. Guillaume, please.
Yeah. So I'll build up a little bit on what Peter and Pierre just said. See two different scenarios: one where you don't have tests and one where you have tests. If you have tests, just have fun, change things, and run your test. And this is actually the funniest part of your day, at least for me. If you don't, this is a little bit more difficult, but as Pierre mentioned, you probably are using an IDE or a resharding tool or something like that that will give you automated refactoring tools, which are already quite powerful. We mentioned the extract method, which is probably the one I use the most, or just extracting stuff, or introducing object, or creating an object based on a set of properties. And as it is automated, it is safe, even if you don't have tests for that. But easy win, definitely extract method. Go towards a more declarative style where you say what you want to do instead of showing some logic with extracting a method. Solid principles are always a good go. And then if show your code to someone from your team. If within 10 seconds they can't tell you what's going on, discuss why and try to make it simpler. The goal at the end of the day is to make the code readable for someone else from your team or for your future self. So
your 5 minutes future self.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, as Peter just said, just try. And worst case scenario, you break something. You're just one control V away to come back from safety. You have nothing to lose.
So
Yeah,
I
one side
I
note,
actually no go.
No, Oliver, you go.
My answer is long, so go.
All right. I was just point out that if you have tests, you should first test if you can trust them. I think that's really important because we all know green tests that don't do anything. So if you want to trust your tests, but you're not sure if they're okay, just break the code, run your tests, and if they don't fail, you know you have to Control Z and find out why the test is not failing. But that would be, I think it's really important that you first establish if you're in a new code base, if you can trust the tests. I think that's really important before you start breaking things.
And the practice you mentioned, that is mutation testing. And yeah,
I would just call it manual mutation testing.
Manual, exactly. But that's the best way to start, I would say, with mutation testing, really, to exercise and change your code around, introduce small mutations, modification, and see whether your test fails. And if you don't have any failing tests, then you have things to improve. But yeah, great point, Oliver.
So maybe just
one real quick stuff about mutation. If you're like in a hurry, you might want to go the manual way, because if I'm all about automation and stuff like that, I'm using Striker usually, but it can be quite slow. In my side, it takes 40 minutes to run. So if you can't afford to wait 40 minutes to see if it works or not, try other ways. Sorry, Oliver, your turn.
Oh, it's okay. So I just want my journey to refactoring, because that was actually one of the first thing I learned. I was really, really lucky that in the company I started, there were two guys, Rick Yanda and Patrick Vader, who actually created a clean code workshop where we systematically learned all the code smells, or all like 25, and all the refactorings to actually get to a goal design that makes sense. And I learned that very early on. And one of the most important things there was actually to, besides knowing the code smells, become very good at refactoring with your IDE, because it's very refactoring can take a long time, but actually, if you know all your refactoring shortcuts, it doesn't take that much time anymore. And what you basically always do, the most important refactoring is rename. That one you can always apply and doesn't break anything. And afterwards, it's always a combination of extract variable, extract method, and inline again. And with that, you can basically, then at some point you introduce parameters and then you move methods over there, okay? But the main thing that makes it more readable is really if you extract methods, if you extract variables, if you inline again, and with that you can actually play around with the design and see, well, does that work? No, it doesn't. Then you inline again, you try it out again. And if you can do that with your automated refactoring tools, it's very quick, and you can really discuss also with other people, is this design better than that one? And it doesn't cost you a lot. And I think this was really, really transformative for me. So when I started, I had this workshop, and afterwards I went out and started refactoring small things. And of course, don't refactor too much if you have no tests. but yeah, do it also maybe on your own branch, try it out. But keep on. For me, it's manual. It's a lot of work. You need to learn how to do it, and at some point it becomes like automatic what you do. It's always you notice the patterns that occur when you refactor.
Just now that I think about it, a few recommendation as well. Something that changed the way I approach working with legacy code was a book from Michael Feathers, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. And I consider that being mandatory given that we all work with legacy code at some point. And it's literally a game changer for me. And something else I could mention also, Nicolas Carlo from Montreal, he wrote a toolkit or an aid kit for working with legacy code. So look
Great
around,
resource.
plenty of tips over there.
Yeah. So George also thanks us.
And another point, what I see that with refactoring, the problem is that people tend to forget, or they do it later, or they say, "Yeah, we will refactor it later," and the reality is that it never happens, right? Or even the senior developers, even if they want to refactor, somehow, oh, I don't have time, or we have a time pressure, we need to deploy right now, the customer wants it right now, so therefore they tend to delay it, so they never do it. And and to fix this, TDD is the best practice in my opinion, because TDD has a dedicated phase for refactoring. So if you follow the TDD cycle, the red green refactor cycle, in every 2 minutes you will be reminded to practice refactoring. So of course TDD is a bigger chunk of practice to apply and to adopt. But surely if you do TDD, then you will take care of the quality of your code.
Just before going on TDD and just on the fact that refactoring is important, I think it's also, you need to think about your teammates and you need to think about other people working on the same code base than you. And it's, for me, something that makes you a professional. Imagine you have someone working on your house, redoing like the flooring of the beautiful house we're all in right now. Do you expect them to clean the work before they leave? I do. And I think it's the same for the code. There is some cleaning that needs to be done before you call it a day, before you call it done. And this is something that, like muscle memory, people need to try that and do and keep doing it to make sure that suddenly it's not an additional task, it's part of the job.
Yeah, that's something that Ken Beck talked a lot about in his last book, Tidy First. It's very interesting book.
So Daniel, you were showing a question, right?
Yeah, there was a question here from Anastasia. What's your opinion on Tesla's development versus test-driven development? I think here there are 5 TDD passionate coders, so I think we can answer it. So, gentlemen, please, all of you, feel free to start.
Can we just refer to one of those excellent presentations by Valentina?
Absolutely.
There are some excellent presentations that explain exactly, but the question is a little bit off because it's test last development phase, test driven development. So I think we should then interpret it as test first development. But yeah, the great thing about test first development, and that's the thing that you will never get, is that you will test your tests before you test it, if that makes sense. So you write a test that you know will fail, and you will verify that it will fail. So you'll also verify that whatever you change in the production code will actually make that test pass. And the fact that you test your test is something you cannot get in almost any other way. Every other way to achieve that is not as efficient. I mean, you can of course break your test. I actually do that from time to time. That I actually sometimes I write my code and I say, oh, I should write a test here, and then I actually break my code or my test again to see it fail. So you cannot trust a test that you have not seen fail. And the only way to get that is by writing, or the most efficient way to get it is writing your test first, see it fail, and then see it get fixed. So, in my opinion, I would say that test last is a very inferior approach, and test first is extremely superior. But that's not a really that is not an expected answer for me, I think.
Pierre?
Maybe. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
Now, Pierre, if you want to, please jump in if you would like.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hello.
yeah. You're welcome as well.
Yeah, guys, I have to leave. Sorry, it's already 6. It was great. I hope we will do this next time, and I will be available longer. But I see you later.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy
Thank
your
you.
day.
Bye.
See you next
Thank
time. Bye bye.
you. See ya.
Yeah, Guillaume, please. It's your.
Yeah. So I, without much surprise, I agree with Peter. I do think test driven is much more superior than test last. Now, it doesn't mean that you're bad if you do test last. This is the first thing I want to say. Now, why to test driven superior? Well, first off, how do you know that you're going to write testable code? If you do test last, you realize that when you write the test, which is after the implementation. So you might have to redo your work. And I've seen that happen quite a lot. So the only way to make sure 100% that the code that you write is testable is to write a test first. Sounds obvious, but that is the truth. Okay. And the other big stuff that we not necessarily talk about is when you start writing a test and you start to write your expectation this way, you kind of are the first customer, the first consumer of your code. So you write everything from a public API. So you're able to shape your component based on what you want it to do and based on how you want it to look like. And that's great. This is where you get design feedbacks very early on, and you just don't care about how it's done. It's just, how do I want it to look like? How do I want to use that in the future? And you can design that right away. And lastly, compared to doing test last, it's how do you know your stuff work? Because you're doing something, then you're writing a test, but you might have been wrong already. You have a test that fails. You don't know if it fails for the right reason, as Peter mentioned. If you try to apply TDD, what happens is, if you've been gaming a little, every time you have a test that passes is like a checkpoint. And it's much easier to beat Mario if you can't restart at every beginning of each level rather than doing in one entire game, in one entire run. Okay, so it's like something I mentioned before. You build it incrementally and you iterate on it. So it's a very agile approach again. What a surprise. But I do consider that vastly superior as well. It doesn't mean I do that 100% of the time, maybe 96, 97% of the time. But when I don't do TDD, I take a gamble. I do it because I think I'm safe, I'm confident, but sometimes I fail. And that is fine because I still have test covering my back.
So what would you say is then the reason that we actually need to talk about it? I mean, test first development seems to be vastly superior to test last. I mean, that's what we get from all these sessions. Why does nobody, or so few people, actually continuously practice it? What have you seen? What's your opinions on that?
What, just to clarify, you mean that keep practicing test last development?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at all.
Yeah. Peter, you want to go at it? Or?
Well, what I see, and but it's also something that I find hard to understand, because to me it's crystal clear what needs to be done. But I did I did actually have a talk about it that said TDD, this is the way. It's a way to convince people to start doing TDD. And one of the things I addressed there is that for some reason developers, I think, find it hard to think about, to translate requirements to tests. They rather translate them to code. And that is really, yeah, I think, and that is something there people could practice themselves more. They could think, all right, I have now my code is, now the end result of my code is this, but so what should it be when I'm done? And that is something that I think people find hard to understand. And it's something you have to practice. You have to practice and not think about your code as code, but as a input-output situation. where you put something in, something comes out. And most of the time, our requirements is that it behaves in a certain way, and we have to change that. And if you first think about the output and what it should be, that's when you can write a test. And I think that is something that people should really practice on. And the strange part is they can get a piece of requirements, translate that to code. Why not translate that to a test? I think that is the step they have to do, because I've never seen requirements that said, open the controller, go to this line, add a new if statement here that only, and make sure that then we subtract 10 euros from the total amount because we have a business rule that says that. You get a requirement that says if a customer has a certain flag set, he should get a discount. And if you can translate that as a developer, we translate the requirements to code. That's what we do. Then why not go that extra step and think first about, all right, what does it mean for my output? And then you can write a test, and then you can work on it. And I think that is one of the main reasons holding people back from doing TDD. And if we could find the golden bullet, or if we can find a pill, a red or blue pill, I don't care, and people take that and then suddenly they can, that would really improve the industry. But it would also make some of us jobless. But right, we'll find something else.
I think that if it was named requirement-driven development, we would have less problems with it. But I completely agree with Peter, and this is also something I observed a lot. Transcribing your requirement or your expectation into code is difficult at the beginning. But it's not difficult because it's hard. It's difficult because people are not unfamiliar with it. And this is why we always bother you with small exercise like the FizzBuzz and the submarine and the Roman numeral. All these little katas are here to give you a little sandbox, a safe environment where you can practice. How do I write down my expectation before you jump into your real application with tons of layers, tons of coupling and stuff like that, which will be overwhelming. So the answer is practice. People need to practice more. And we know it's not always easy to find the time or find the energy or whatever. But
we might also, like, stepping away from the original question, but then I get a lot of feedback. People say, yeah, but TDD only works in their small settings. So I think perhaps we should move away from that and just say, hey, open your production code, start working on it. But yeah, I think it's one of the big struggles that I think the industry would do much better if this concept, if we would really start doing it more. And that's what we have to do. We have to convince people that it's really good. So Anastasia, thank you for your question. That's the first step. Ask the questions.
I think maybe there is something regarding the first question that Daniel asked at the beginning of the session, like what is the current state of the market? I think if we, because I for you, but at least for me, I realized it's much easier to teach TDD to someone that is new, a junior, than someone that has 10 years of experience. And that's counterintuitive. And so I think maybe if we were able to, maybe at school, maybe in engineering school, or maybe for junior people to really have that nailed down at the beginning, we wouldn't have so many problems.
So we should get them young. We should go to the colleges and, but yeah, the thing is you first need to program before you can think about code. So there's only so much you can learn in a single moment.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say relating to this, that somehow TDD requires level of emotional intelligence, because what I've seen in the industry that a lot of people are conservative, and let's say a person is in the business and he or she has been developer for more than 10 years, then it's really difficult to change the way how they write software. And because, TDD questions, the whole way how you have been writing code for more than 10 years. So TDD, and you need to change that. You need to say, oh my God, I was wrong in the last 10 years. It's not the best way to write code. And that one is very difficult to say, that I was wrong in the last 5 years or 10 years. And a lot of people just don't, they don't have that emotional intelligence. And so TDD humbles you if you are open to that.
Well, let's then rest assure all those people. I am wrong all the time. So yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed about or
The reason I
saying that
apply
you're less
TDD
because
is
you're
that
wrong.
sorry. The reason I do TDD is because I just do too many mistakes. It's a safety net for me. And that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And also that TDD is not just a refactoring tip, right? It's not just something, okay, we take it and plug into the development process and it works, or it's another new principle. It's really a complete package to design code, write tests, and refactoring code in a short cycle based off working. And this, it's a drastic change for most developers. So therefore, it's difficult to take that pill. And what I've seen also that many people, especially nowadays, with the boom of AI, everyone thinks, okay, I don't need to code anymore. I use AI and create website, and they still do it. That they just don't care. And that's the harsh truth. They just don't care about TD. They don't care about the quality. They get a good salary. So why would I care about the quality? But it all comes down to software craftsmanship, right? I mean, we are software crafters when we care about our craft and we care about the things we produce.
So I mean, the refactoring alone is already a lot of work to learn. So if you want to do TDD, then you should also know how to design software actually and to refactor it fast. But I also think we should not underestimate what it means if you program for 10 or 15 years in a certain way. You also get quite good at programming that way and also reading what we would call bad code, I think. So for me, that's also something I see. I can barely convince anybody who is longer in the industry to actually do these things. I also see that the younger people are much more into that.
Yeah, I agree, even though what I'm going to say is not really specific to TDD, but it's more about just having test automation usually. But I came across very experienced people that were writing what we could say is good code, but without tests, and just having, right, I'll say it, an excuse that is, I know my code works. That is not enough. It's enough if you work alone on your project and you don't have anybody else in your team. If you have someone else on your team, you want them to be able to change your code safely because they were not there with you when you wrote it. And what about your 5 minute future self or 5-year future self? You want to be sure that you have something helping you on that. And just writing good code is not enough. We need to remind us that we work in a team. We never work alone. Software development is much more a social activity than people think about it. So it's always for the greater good.
The greater good. I think it's also important that people know how to write tests well. I think that's also something you need, that skill. You need to know how to write good tests. And that is sometimes also something that is holding people back, I think. Because TDD is really simple in that sense. You can explain that in 5 minutes. But there comes a lot more with it. You need to be comfortable writing unit tests quickly in a way that they're readable and that they don't break and that they test well. And that's a style issue that you need to learn. You need to learn a certain amount of that's where you develop your own style when you're writing tests. I mean, it's you can do this in so many ways, which is also the fun of it, I think. I can do things in unit tests what I cannot do my production code because my production code is meant to be efficient. It has to be consistent because we started writing it 10 years ago, but unless we refactor everything, we're not gonna put in those new constructs we have now. But in a unit test, why not use FAR? Why not use FAR arcs? Why not play around with your own DSL for a specific part of your code? You can do all that in a test because it's not production code. So as long as the test serves its purpose and it's clear and the test is of quality itself, it's still readable, then why not experiment a little bit? Which is, I think, where I have the most fun.
And as Guillaume said, that that with those tests, I mean. That with the testing before and after that, and that if you do it before, then it just makes you the first user of the code, and tests are the first users of the code, and so you feel already you feel already how your code should be used in real time or by your other people, and that's really a big power. And also when you do it afterwards, then so in my opinion, when you do test after, writing tests afterwards loses most of the joy of writing tests. Somehow when you do it before, it's more fun. It's it's a turn, when you do TDD, it's a turn-based way to write code with some small exact goals to achieve, and you just keep repeating these turn-based cycles, and it makes TDD it's really fun. But when you have to do it after the fact, it becomes a chore. Okay, I have to do the testing. Oh, this is the last step, I need to do the testing. And I think that's one of the reasons that people don't like testing that much, because they think like it's a chore. But actually, it's not just for verification, it's also for designing code. So yeah.
The fact that what you said is true there. If you make testing something that needs to happen after, it's something you can cancel. It's something you can decide not to do because it's an additional task. Start with it. There is no discussion after that. One example I'd like to give about the design feedback that you get when you are the first user of your code. I've seen a lot when you create a new class, a component, a use case, whatever you want. People start with the implementation and they put set properties, they use AutoGet, AutoSet, stuff like that. And when they arrive at the test, they don't need those. And when you start with TDD, for example, it forces you to have a good encapsulation of that. You don't write those properties because you don't need them. You only write the code that is necessary for you to make the test pass. And the rest is inside. It's like implementation details. It's really a different way of addressing the problem. And when you get that momentum, Daniel was talking about the cycle, repeating the cycle. When you get that momentum, you realize that actually you're going quite fast when you're when you're used to it. And it's addictive. Yep. You just run your test, you see all the green bubbles. It's a dopamine shot for you. I love it.
You're a programmer. You're a programmer because the test turned green. It's a good feeling. But
how much
it works for us.
The
problem is that apparently a lot of people don't feel that way, or they're not open to experiencing that. And I think that's a challenge. We're all here, like-minded people, so yeah, I think that's the big challenge, to have more people experience this joy.
But how much is it also dependent on the tools you use? I don't know, but when I do it front-end wise compared to back-end wise, I have to think of so many more things, and everything is async and everything. I've seen test suites that are really everything green, and once I put the done in it, then all of a sudden none of the tests are green anymore because they weren't considering that it's asynchronous. And in my opinion, it's just a bit harder to do front-end TDD than back-end TDD. But maybe it's also because I have more experience with back-end TDD.
I have experienced a mixed project, and I am very much a back-end guy, so it was kind of new to me. We used Angular, and I found that if you indeed do TDD and really try to do it at the start and then make unit tests and not write big front end. Let's start the application and click through it and hope that nobody changed their labels, because then our entire test will collapse. I think that kind of did work. And especially if you apply a very old pattern that says, look, what happens in the UI happens in the UI, but anything business logic goes in a separate Java class, or JavaScript class, or something that just takes input, makes some changes, and gives you the output that you need to show on the screen. So it really pays to have that split in the front end between the things you show on the screen, your UI components, and the data that goes into them. That makes your life much easier, because then you can test those specific things really thoroughly, And those UI parts you can just test if your button shows when it's enabled, or you can do less complex testing.
It's a shame we lost Pierre for that question. I'll just say.
Yeah.
He's listening from on the ground in the subway.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
So
I
Pierre,
saw
you
some.
owe us a detailed explanation for that. Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
You can write it.
I also saw some very interesting other questions.
Sure, go for it if you have something.
Go.
Happy.
No, I saw it in the chat actually. There was a question: how can you refactor a PHP website when there are no functions?
Okay, let me check.
It's like
I have it.
Yeah.
but I think this is really interesting. The first question that you should ask is, should you? I mean, if something works, should you really break it? One of the things I experienced this myself. I was working in a very big monolithic system, which did everything in one application. Even the so we had customers, and to charge those customers with a specific part in the application that would calculate their fee. So based on the usage, the size of their, it would take into account how many text messages they had consumed, and that code was, and there were, and of course, for this specific customer, he got a specific discount 20 years ago when we started, and we needed money. All those rules were in there, and we had a very strict rule there that we were improving the code base. So when we change something, we should actually try to always make it better. So we had a very good product owner. We had good leads, and they all said, okay, if we touch a piece of code, we have to bring it up to par with our standards. And then there came a request that said, look, those text messages, we only charge them for one, but you can now send multiple text messages. So we want to charge them for two, otherwise we're losing money. And then there was a discussion that started with, yeah, but then we need to refactor this entire piece of arcane code that nobody knows about, but it's about money. So yeah, the moment one of those customers suddenly loses his discount, then you will get a big nasty complaint. So then we made a decision, okay, this code sucks, but all we have to do is change one counter to include not only the text messages, but include the parts of the message. So we decided, well, let's just change that and leave this piece of code and not touch it, because there was just no way to really start. So Jay, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, sometimes you have to think, all right, this is what we have. And as you said, it taps directly into the database. I saw also that the HTML was also very bad. So it's really hard to start refactoring there. But the thing you can do there is, of course, split your rendering from what you're showing. So that would be the first go at it if you want to.
What I was about going to say is, sadly, I mean, we're all talking about the benefits of TDD and testing and all the things and refactoring and blah, blah, blah. But there is no magic wand for everything. So if you are on a relatively big application with plenty of coupling and business logic and directly having database call inside the logic and stuff like that, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And for you, it will require hard work to go somewhere where you have a reliable test suite and do things. So it's based on what I see in your question, it's very difficult to give you a tailored answer that will help you, because it seems that there's more to it than just that. I think you have like higher scale problems on that. So my advice there is maybe something we said before, using refactoring. Can you maybe use some automated refactoring from your IDE or tool that you use to at least do something safe on your code base that you can't really test, or you can't really verify that if it works or not? That would be safe. And otherwise, you're going to throw yourself into a huge rework over there. And the problem is, depending on your environment, it might not be possible, because you might spend weeks, months doing that, while this is something that doesn't provide any business value. and I'm sorry to say, but it won't get approved. So it's sometimes when it's too late like that, you got to stick to the Boy Scout rule. Just leave the fire camp in the better shape than you found it, but don't try to reinvent the world overnight. You won't be able to do it, and you will fail. I tried, I failed. So it's try to go step by step, baby steps, and see where you go, but don't be humble and realistic with your expectations.
And those baby steps, they can really work, because the same system I worked on, we had an invoice.gsp, which would generate a PDF. You can imagine how that looked when that was more than 10,000 lines of GSP code, which generates a PDF in the end. We also took really small steps there every time, taking something out. If we're adding something, at least when you add something to the new source system, make sure that at least you split your input and your view and put the service in there. But it's slow going. So as already mentioned, it really depends on where you want to go and how fast, but you can always start slow. So if you then add a new thing to this enormous PHP website, at least try to make a separation between your UI and your business logic, have a service in there, and from there on, and then have something to go to. And every time you refactor something, well, refactor it in the new paradigm and the new way of doing things. But it will involve patience, and it will involve hard work and careful work, because breaking things is always very bad.
Okay, maybe she has another, or he, she has another question. Maybe we can bring that up as well. Asks, how can I have a safety net with ever-changing data and with generated HTML that is formatted like?
That is badly formatted.
I think it's kind of related to the previous one.
But I think the most important part is the ever-changing data. You have to change that. If you can't change that, you can't have stable tests. So you need to start developing a test set, a test database set, a test environment where it will not be ever-changing, because ever-changing data can never lead to a stable test.
It means ever-changing test.
Yeah, a test cannot be ever-changing. So there's a contradiction. It won't work out. You can, of course, this generated HTML, that's fine. You can just take the generated HTML and compare it with the one it should be. That at least gives you a very rough, a very brittle, I think also not a very useful test to diagnose problems, but at least it gives you a feeling that if you change something in the output. But ever-changing data, you cannot deal with that. If your data ever changes, then you need to be at least able to predict what's going into your test and what comes out. If that ever changes, then you're I want to say a word. I want to say a word that also starts with an S, but then you're in a bad spot. Let's say that.
And even for the generating the HTML side, you could have you can rely on approval testing to make sure that at least this input provides the expected HTML. And this is not something that should change too often. So there are things that help you do that, but eventually we have to look at the big picture. And
yeah, that's what I wanted to also recommend, the approval testing, because over there, that is a great way to compare the rendered HTML. And if you break something, then you will see what is the difference. But I'm not 100% sure whether really it is the best way, or really to produce good coverage for the application to really refactor it. So I'm not sure. Approval test is a great stuff if you if you have a lot of coupling to the database and other stuff. But I was just wondering that whether it would totally solve this issue, but I'm not sure of that. It could help surely to have more confidence when you do the changes, but I wouldn't say that it would lead 100% confidence. Yeah, it's a really tricky.
So,
but really
what is approval testing for me? Because it's a new term for me. So
So approval testing is a way of sort of generating, there are a lot of kind of approval tests as well, but this is a sort of generating. I mean, in this context, let's see the example. You can see what is the HTML, what is rendered, really the HTML, the markup language. So and you have it stored somewhere. After that, you change the code, you run again the same test, and you see whether the HTML, remains the same. So whether the difference between the two HTML markup is the same. And if you have one difference, for example, one development changes, or a class name has been changed, or whatever, then of course you have a difference. So it means you broke something. So approval test is a sort of test out your things where you have a lot of coupling, for example, to the databases. For example, that's a great phase. So they approve that your code really behaves the same how it behaved before. But you check the end result. But these results are a very fragile test, and in some sense, because it's like very tied to the HTML, and if you even have just one tag is missing in the HTML, but then this test breaks. So these tests often break. So that's approval tests are good, I would say, temporarily to solve it, but after that most of them should be discarded, in my opinion.
I mean, for me, those are legacy code testing. I mean, you have nothing else, and then you just assert the output, because that's the only thing you have. And when you change something, if it changes with it. If it breaks, then you did something bad. But it should never be the end result or the end test for your system.
Exactly. It's my code produces that. I don't know how, but I want to remain that, and I want to be able to change, and I still want to expect that thing.
So to sum up the answer, stop the ever-changing data, and then at least use approval testing so you can start safely changing things. Or at least have a safety net to validate that your changes did not break the system any more than it was already.
Yeah. That sounds reasonable.
Now the execution.
Here we have a topic from Jake related to testing, but also to coupling. Let's see. He says, in a complex app with a lot of coupling, everything is so fragile, but I feel overwhelmed when I think about all the tests that need to be written.
Something we mentioned earlier already is start, but start small. You don't have to look at everything and expect to do everything all at once. Obviously, when you have coupling like that, the idea usually is to start breaking it, but you don't want to break it everywhere. You start small and you iterate on it. And this is how you... I don't remember who said this, so maybe someone can help me here. But that the most challenging task of a software developer is to be able to split big work into a lot of small pieces of work. And this is what we're talking about here. Trying to isolate your work and iterate on it. Yeah,
I think I once started on the system when I joined the company. I had 400 tests, and when I left, I had like 6,000. But it took 2.5 years, and also convincing other people to start writing tests. So, yeah. To quote a famous book, every journey starts with the first step. So it perhaps takes a long way, but you just have to start, and then don't feel overwhelmed. Just think whatever I do is making it a little bit better.
Try not to think too much about the big picture. I know it's difficult when you know the product, when you're in like day in, day out, but try to focus only on what you work on and try to abstract everything else. Don't think about everything else. Just focus on that tiny component you're working on. Focus on that. And at the end of the day, if you did something about it, your code base in a better place than it used to be the day before. But it takes small steps to go somewhere.
Absolutely. And also take it as as a best learning opportunity if in your life. Personally, when I remember back then, 5-6 years ago, or even more, I was involved in a project, and we had a really, bandwidth and code, and we need to do, refactoring because we needed to add some new functionality, so we need to refactor. And that was my best. I mean, those moments were really the best learnings of my life relating to refactoring, testing, and decoupling. So these things, maybe it feels really bad. Oh my God, I have a lot of bandwidth and code, coupled, etc. But that's the best opportunity for you to learn how to improve the design. You learn a lot of new stuff. For example, refactoring, how to decouple code, and how to test fair, and also mutation testing, because if you need to refactor the code, you need to do some mutation testing. So this just embrace it. Be happy that you have this opportunity and learn from it. Because let's say if you are always on a greenfield project, then you don't always experience these. And the best way to learn this, that if you really you are in a deep water with this bandwidth and stuff, in my opinion.
And I also think, again, that the characterization tests exactly for such coupled applications are actually quite a good way to start. Even if you only start with a very small part of it, you don't need to. If you have procedural code and it's hundreds of lines of code, then it's hard to actually write a useful test. It takes a lot of time, and also if you do a characterization test, that also takes a lot of time. But focus on the smaller things if you can. Just exactly, don't get overwhelmed. Just look at what you need to do now and start small baby steps. And well, another thing is do it continuously. Don't do it one day for 10 hours and then stop and don't do it anymore. But actually, I think sometimes it's a bit like the start is slow, but when you get on with the tests, all of a sudden you have lots of tests, and then the testing also becomes easier. It's like when you get over this hill of where you have to push through afterwards, all of a sudden it becomes easier. At least that's how I feel sometimes, because at some point you have tested stuff, and that stuff you don't need to test anymore because it works.
Nothing feels better than coming back a piece of code and thinking, I need to write that. Oh no, I have an excellent test here. All I need to do is add my breaking test for this small feature I need to add.
Yeah.
See it fail, go into my other code, fix it, and I'm done. And then you feel, then you start feeling the power of test driven and having a good test suite that you can trust. Then you really feel empowered by it. And I think that's so. Yeah, Jake, you're really lucky that you can learn so much. But yeah, I understand that you feel overwhelmed, especially if you are like being responsible for this, the doing all this stuff. And I think one of the other things you could really do, is a topic I'm very passionate about, is make those tests that you want to write bigger. So instead of trying to test every class separately, putting a lot of mocks in there, if you write a bunch of big tests, which might be called integration tests by some, I just like to call them fast tests because they still need to be fast if you want to do refactoring. But try to make big scope tests, because if you have a big scope test, then you can play along with all that coupling you see there. You can refactor there, run the test, and see it pass. And if you, for example, have for every separate test, every class a separate test, then and you start tangling with the coupling, then the coupling will actually bite you, because now you need to mock all your coupling in another way, and it will not help you a bit. So in your case, if you have a lot of coupling you want to get rid of, write some big tests at a high abstraction level, the controller or the surface, and make sure you test everything together and not write separate tests for every class, because then they will actually not help you when you have to decouple things.
Something also that is very that you might want to look into, Jake, is there are some patterns or practices that you can use, especially in that scenario. I remember, you can find it online. Go on YouTube, look for Sandro Mancuso. He made a live experiment with a trip service when he displays how to use a seam, the seam principle. And in that case, it's literally, how can I still test something individually while it still has coupling on something, which is just great. And everybody should know how this works. Or you could use also the triangular pattern if you want to do something like that. There are ways that will help you. You need to get along with it. You need to learn them, and they will simplify your life as well.
Can you maybe, just for everybody to remember the strangler pattern? Well, just overview.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with the strangler fig tree. It's basically a tree in the Amazonian forest that grow around an existing tree and will grow on top of it and capture all the light. So what happens is the tree inside will slowly die and only the external skeleton will remain. And the idea is to do the same when you want to introduce a change on your code base, and you want to do that gradually. So you might have like a method to do a deposit on a bank, and you want to change the signature, and you do that, and you realize that this method has been used in 120 places in your code base, and it will take you 3 days to go back into a green state. What you could do is create another method similar to that one and link them together. So one with the new signature will use the old one, and you will be able to gradually integrate the new version inside your code base, and it's still the same code inside. And the great thing about that is every time you can do a change, you're still in the green state. So you can commit, you can push, and you can do that over time. You don't have to do everything all at once. That's a great tool when you're working on the legacy code base. Even in a non-legacy code base, just any code base.
That's a great tip.
By the way, Jake, so relating what Peter said about this bigger test, he had a great performance at Tech Excellence Meetup, I don't know, half a year ago or so. I put his session in the comments, so you can check it out. And it's a great session if you want to learn about how to write bigger tests.
Actually, Jake, while we're at it, because now that what Daniel said just brought me something. I was one of the first guests on the channel with you and Thierry, and I think we displayed live how to do a strangler. Maybe go back to the old time on the channel and find out that there was something about it, maybe. But that was a long time ago. I don't remember very well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of great sessions about all these topics, and all of them are recorded. So yeah, absolutely. If you just write the keywords in the YouTube with the Tech Excellence, you can find all of them, and we cover most of the topics. So in deep details with really great professionals. So highly recommend it. Here we have an question we could talk about for hours. If developers do testing, what's the role of Q&A? So yeah, gentlemen.
We don't have any specific Q&A people anymore on our team. Just the BAs and the developers together, they write the test scripts, and or at least the business analysts have this final say about the test scripts, but they create them. So
everyone is Q&A.
Yeah, we're all Q&A. We're DevOps, so if it breaks, it's our problem. We cannot say, yeah, but you didn't test it well. That's, of course, one of the most silly things to say. If you break production, you say, yeah, but you should have tested it better. No, you're all QA, exactly.
It's shift left. You build quality from day one, and it's not the responsibility of someone in particular. So it starts from the developers. I don't know if I interrupted, Peter. Were you still going somewhere?
Go ahead.
Okay, because I probably won't make a lot of friends with my answer. Right. Do you all remember the agile pyramid of testing? Maybe I think I've said agile like 5 or 6 times already during the anyway. So agile pyramid of testing. The idea was to make a representation of the volume of tests we have in the code base, with the unit test at the bottom being like the very wide layer, meaning we have a lot of unit tests. And the higher you go in the pyramid, the less tests you have, and the longer they were to run, and the more expensive they were to maintain and write. And so you go from unit integration, blah, blah, blah. You go up to the top where you have end-to-end that is still automated. And then you have one little more layer at the top, which is manual testing or exploratory testing. It's at the top because you have very few, right? So you're not supposed to have a quality assurance engineer that is doing manually a full Excel file of test case that will take him 2 days to do that every time you do a release. This is not how you do quality assurance. What they do is exploratory testing. They need to go out in your product, play with it, try to find edge cases, try to find how can I break stuff, how can I find stuff that we didn't think about. This is where you get value out of it. Asking someone to try a login page 60 times in a day doesn't make any sense, and it's a waste of money, effort, and time. So you need to make sure that you automate what you can automate, and you don't automate where you need to have some kind of human thinking behind. Like, how can I break my system? Can I try stuff that we didn't think about? This is what QA is for me. And to just give you an idea, I don't have any QA in my team, and it's well tested, and I barely have any bugs. I do have some from time to time, but they get fixed pretty fast.
I actually have a lot of because currently I work on an API-based system, so all we do is send out data, and other people make applications that use that data. Sometimes I have a lot of discussions, and we always try to be backward compatible. So we only expand our contracts. We always make sure that we don't break our contract by removing things. But I do have a lot of discussions with some of the functional QA people. Yeah, but how can you just release this? It might break my application. I'm like, yeah, well, that's your application. My tests are all green. And of course, we learned there. So now sometimes when we feel that, all right, this might be something that impacts the UI. For example, we used to only return a single product, but now those products get split in 2 separate products, and we don't know if the UI handles it. Then we give them some time to indeed do a small test, and we deploy the branch. Good thing we have branches. We deploy the branch to the auto environment, say, okay, run through it and see if you have no problems, because we don't want to break stuff for our customers. But yeah, I'm very strict in the fact that we have very good tests already. We work hard on the test scripts. If we say it's done, we go to production, and we don't wait on any human interaction, except for the final approval of the merge request, because we have to be compliant as a big bank. And no QA there. And I think if you really want to be agile and continuous delivery, then you have to eliminate this human factor. And of course, it doesn't mean you have to do it always. You have to acknowledge that sometimes there might be a problem. But I think it's really, I think the way forward is to automate everything. People are too expensive and too slow. That is.
I again completely agree with Peter. I just want to add my 2 cents on what he said about automation. Something we
lost it. I think he will come back.
He sure comes back.
Surely, and he can continue. Here he is, so he can continue.
Sorry, folks. I really want to apologize because it seems I'm disconnecting every 15 minutes or so.
No worries.
My browser just decides to refresh. Problem I will address later. What I wanted to say, about automation, it's not just about winning time. It's also about reliability. If we do a manual interaction, especially when it's repetitive, it's prone to error, and that for everything. And automation is reliable. If it works once, it will always work, and we don't have to think about that anymore. Doing something manually, you will forget something. You will do something differently every single time. And when I say you, I say me. So it's like safety for the product. It's not just about winning time. For sure, that's also a nice side effect, but reliability first.
Yeah. So what's the role to QA? I think it's still very, very helpful to have people in your team that can, for example, automate large test scripts and think about QA, because thinking about QA is something that is not natural to every developer. And thinking, what are the corner cases? What are the edge cases? how much load should the system have? Because there are a lot of things that QA can still do. Security testing. You still have the load, the performance testing. Those are really specific things that requires a QA mindset. And I still think that's a very valuable role that the QA has to offer. But everything that can be automated should be automated, I think. Yeah.
And also, if the let's say if your developers cannot do testing very well, then the QA people can teach them. So that's also, I think, because many times because we see that they don't know that they should have the mindset to break the software. They just write tests for the sake of having them. So they should be taught by the QA people to really have this mindset to break the software and to write clean tests and proper tests, and to build the quality from day one and have this quality assurance mindset from the very beginning. So that's I've seen it working very well as a QA role. And also,
I just wanted to bring up Pierre. Also,
sure.
He's also still discussing with us. So for him, Q&A is exploratory testing in parallel of the delivery pipeline, not a gatekeeper. But unfortunately, never seen that in real life.
Well,
yeah,
we still have to improve things, right? We still have to continuously improve. So who knows? In 50 years, this will be the moment of truth, and we can point back to this moment in time that something that we didn't do but now all do was happening just here today. So we might have just written history, people.
All it takes to prove it is to have someone sitting next to you and showing how we work. It's as simple as that. In reality, it's more difficult to do. But at the end of the day, it's also what we are kind of trying to do with this meetup as well, is to maybe not right now because it's a channel discussion, but when you have a presentation, you have someone showing you something. It doesn't come out of thin air. It's always something that comes from experience on the field, in professional products, and at some point, it's I wish we could just take someone on the job and show him during a day, this is how we do, that's the proof you can do it and you can move on. But it's not that simple.
You could do a live stream or so, just the whole day. People can check in, watch you work.
That would be an experiment.
And there we are, looking things up on news sites or writing a private email, and then
yeah. But relating to this, the biggest issue and problem with this QA that they treat it as a separate team, separate entity, and it should be a part of it. It should be a part of the team, so it's not a separate team. And if it's a separate team, then you introduce this gatekeeping nature, which slows you down very much. So
there is another question in the chat that is directly related to what we're talking about from Paul, and I think we can maybe jump on it.
Yeah, this one, Paul.
Yeah.
Let me say, QA can write specifications that can be automated by devs, executable specifications, acceptance test-driven development.
So I think it is true to some extent, and I'll try to explain. So I think what Paul is mentioning is writing stuff using the Gherkin syntax that you can just reuse, and having that with SpecFlow or something similar, Cucumber, whatever, and that is true. Now, where I would, let's say, have mixed feelings is depending on how you work. You might want to, talking about TDD again, but you might want to do, for whatever reason, the TDD double loop, right? So in your case, the developer has to start from the acceptance test and write it itself to find its way until which is the outside in, basically, version of TDD, and in that case, you can't have a whole set of features being delivered by a QA given to a developer. To just finish on that, and to relate with what Daniel was saying just before, what matters here is we should not treat QA and developers as two separated teams. The worst thing I've seen is developers working on something and at the end of the sprint, giving that to a QA that will test it on the next sprint and that will find defects and will put it back into the backlog, and it will be processed in the next sprint by developers again. That ping pong should not happen.
The other variant is, of course, that you stop delivering features for a month while the QA teams are testing your
exactly
doing the final integration testing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
so just to finish on Paul, I agree about that. They could help, but I think they should sit next to developers on that one, because when you provide a gherkin file, depending on the wording you use and how you can reuse specific given when then features right there, you need the developers to plug that in the backend to make sure we call the right code with the right thing, and you have to do that synchronously. You can't rely on asynchronous communication for it.
I can see it also in our current team that the BAs, the business analysts, and the developers are always in very short circles talking to each other and reporting problems. BAs come up with a fix or the other way around, and it's really working well. Work together, be agile, people over processes. That's the way to do things.
I hate silos. Yeah.
Yeah, async is a sort of antipattern, right? I mean, doing things asynchronously within a team. So, for example, that's what pair programming and mob programming solves, right? That we do it together at the same machine, we review it together, and it prevents a lot of unnecessary tasks such as PRs and other things.
I just think what I noticed when we had like a dedicated tester was that they found stuff that even with pair programming and everybody was focused on delivering that it worked, they found stuff that we didn't think. And sometimes it was just like, I mean, not that often, but it was just like reassuring, oh, well, there is something. That just a mindset. Probably it's more the exploratory way of looking at the features. But that is still something that adds value, in my opinion. Not a QA department, but just one person that has a bit of a different view and mindset.
Yes, exactly. Having that mindset is very good, but it should also test the requirements, because that is most of the time, if I get bugs back, they're not in the code because the code has been tested, confirmed the requirements, but most of the time they're in the requirements. One of the things I remember is that I was doing some calculations, some period-based calculations, and I ended up when I get a requirement that said, "Oh, but you were supposed to go with 100%, but now you have 103%. So what happened?" So I went back. I was like, okay, yeah, that's logical because there are some rounding issues there. And I was rebuilding an existing system. So I went back to the existing code, and it literally the line that said, "Oh, are you above 100%? Cap it to 100%." I said, okay, this should be the requirements because it wasn't in the requirements. Yeah, I just hope to catch those things as early as possible is really important, because this apparently I was literally rewriting existing code. So, but apparently there was somebody who run into the same problem based on the same requirements, put in a line that said, "All right, I just kept it at 100%," and it didn't go back into the requirements. So yeah, have your QA people test those requirements as well.
Yeah, generally, earlier you do things in software, the better it is. Refactor early, test early, deliver early, collaborate early,
and feedback. Lots of feedback all the time. That's like the most important. Don't just take it and run with it. Think about what you're doing.
Exactly.
I think that goes with a lot of things. Not with everything, but with most things you should think about. Well, we just gave somebody else advice not to think too much about it. So that was Jake, I think.
All right. We are at the last minute. So I think it's time to wrap up. So I would like to say a huge thanks to our speakers, Guillaume, Peter, and also Pierre as well, and Oliver. It was a really great show. It was the first time we done it, and I think it's not the last. We learned a lot, and we drive the session based on the question of the audience. So I hope we could help everyone. So again, thanks a lot for everyone.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for the
That's fun.
invitation. I had a great time. It,
Awesome.
was fun.
Cool.
That's the most important. So, all right, well, let's launch it. So again, we were Tech Excellence, learn how to deliver quality software faster. And as I already mentioned, we can be found in a lot of places such as Meetup, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, GitHub, and we have a great Discord community. So that was it. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I wish you a following day, a good day further, and see you next time. Thank you, everyone.